Welcome to part 3 of creating an anime environment in Blender. Today we're going to be working on geometry. This is a crucial part that goes into creating this style of environment. When we're talking NPR, like non-photoreal, anime, or stylized, there's a very specific thing that I use when it comes to geometry. So right off the bat, you can see here, very simple, right now 3 cubes, but the biggest thing I want you guys to take out of this is look at how I'm marking the edges. I mark these edges with freestyle mark edges. So you do Control E, mark freestyle edge. This is the most important part of the entire geometry process. I don't care what anybody says. For my style, like if you've seen my artwork on Twitter, Instagram, Discord, wherever, right? And you want to recreate this, I know people say, oh, use grease pencil, use whatever. I personally love freestyle. You have a lot of possibility with it, a lot of diversity, a lot of modifiers you can use. And one of the best things is with Mark Freestyle Edge, I know you can use it for grease pencil. I haven't played around with it enough. But Freestyle Edge, I find it's not that long to render for me, especially if I mark the freestyle edge. If you're using crease, border, or silhouette, things like that, it drastically slows down your render times. But if you're only using mark freestyle edge, they're fast renders. They don't take that long. So the modeling process, the most important part is to make sure that you're thinking about where your 2D lines are going to go. Are you going to have lines here, there, wherever? And for this medieval style, it's a very simple modeling process, and I pretty much only use cubes. So you can see here I just have cubes for the shiplap. I just shrink them down, scale down, make them thinner, and then I start marking out this shiplap kind of shape. And you wanted some variation. Some of these like old medieval houses, they had these like cross beams in between horizontal beams. I don't know if that was more for structure or design appeal, I don't know, but it gives some more feel to your houses. So I always add some of those in. And then like windows, another thing is when you're modeling the geometry windows, I usually just use loop cuts from the base cube, so the original cube that we had added. I add the shiplap over top of it, and then I'll add loop cuts where I want the window texture to go, because I just like to keep it as simple as possible. You can cheat a lot when it comes to anime style. You're not going for photoreal, and you guys have to realize this. Photoreal, you're going to have really good geometry. Your texturing is going to be really good, and your lighting is going to have to be perfect. Like, yeah, photoreal is all about lighting. And anime is the same way, except it's about having bad lighting. If that makes sense. I'll go over this in a couple videos from now when we go into shading. But your geometry, the only reason some of it has to be good is that if you have overlapping mesh, if you have geometry that should be connected, or if you have flipped normals, what will happen is when you render your freestyle lines, you'll get like this line jitter sometimes where the freestyle line doesn't quite know where the edge is. And so that can be easily fixed. You can hit A, select all your mesh, Shift N, and recalculate your normals. Often that fixes a lot of the problems. And also you'll have parts where your mesh is overlapping. That's why when you do this, don't have too much of your mesh overlapping with each other. So, I mean, you won't really know until you do your renders, your test render, and sometimes you won't even know until you do your animation. Sometimes still renders are beautiful, and then you go do your animation and you're like, oh man, there's a lot of jitter in this. But it's typically a very quick fix, and a lot of times it stems from your geometry. So in the geometry process, keep it simple, use loop cuts. You'll see when I want extra detail, so like here, I'm adding this stick out part of the house. I'm going to use loop cuts to add these boards instead of using extra cubes. Instead of adding extra cubes, I'll use loop cuts, and then I'll just mark those edges so that when I render it, it literally just looks like it's multiple boards, but it's just one face with multiple edges. So when you're making these, keep it simple. You don't have to do a whole lot complex geometry. Like I said, in this, you won't see me use any other shape than a cube. It's just cubes shaped in different ways. And so like the roofs, I'll just Control X dissolve an edge to get the slanted triangle. But it all starts from a cube, and that's not hard to do. So your detail really just comes from the shiplap, especially in this like old medieval style. You have like these basic stucco or canvas walls, and then you have shiplap, wood, and a couple windows. Here you can see what I was talking about with the edge loops. I make all these edge loops, and then I hit Control E, mark Freestyle edge. Now when I render this, it's going to look like it's a whole bunch of slabs of wood or shiplap or whatever you want to call it, which is going to give it a lot more detail with not much more geometry. That's not going to cause any problems because you're not going to have overlapping mesh. You're not going to have any normal problems. And it's all your vertices are already connected. You just added more, you basically just subdivided, It's really simple. So when you're doing these, keep it simple. Use edge loops. A lot of times, keeping things flat is good. I've learned from, making stoves and kitchens and stuff in anime style, that excess geometry can actually have the opposite effect that you want. Excess geometry or more detailed geometry can make it look more 3D than 2D, and we don't want that. So when that happens, you can reduce the geometry, add more freestyle line edges. That's like my solution for everything. Freestyle lines make everything to come together. Imagine you're drawing this house, this house right here. If you're drawing it on a piece of paper, you're going to start out with the sketch. And the sketch, whether it's pencil, pen, more than likely pencil, is going to be a black outline before you get into the coloring and everything else. So you need to prioritize the lines. Without those lines, it looks ugly. I mean, if you see my renders, honestly, I probably should show you guys one of my renders without any freestyle lines, because they look so incredibly flat and ugly. It's funny to look at. And it's like that one detail of when I'm modeling and marking the freestyle edges makes the world of a difference. And the reason I don't use crease for like the crease setting for freestyle lines is because it doesn't always catch everything you want. But if you mark all your edges, you will always get the lines where you want them to be. Sometimes you might have to fix geometry, edges, flip normals, stuff like that. But your lines will be calculated and drawn where you want them to be every single time. And I personally love that because it's such a huge part of it. And if the lines aren't right, then nothing is right with the entire environment. So you can see I model in the house, getting the sides done, working on the door here. So I separate it so that I can just work on it real quick. And the doors are, again, really easy. Like a wooden door, instead of creating slabs of cubes or slabs of wood, I just use loop cuts. And then the loop cuts down the center were like a metallic kind of, I don't know what you would call it, metallic band across it. Probably the hardest part of this entire modeling process is when it comes to the wood that contacts with the roof. And with that, I use the magnet tool or snap to tool, snap to edge, and then I'll grab the edges and just make sure that I'll do like G, Z, and then just bring them down to the roof. Again, because you don't want overlapping mesh. You can really take a shortcut and just have it overlap into the roof, but then you won't have the freestyle lines there, which we don't want. And then here we have, I'm just doing like a ornamental detail kind of thing, just from a cube, rotated 45 degrees, and then, loop cuts, inset, nothing complicated. Like, these are all things you guys can learn from your simple, like, Blender Guru video of, like, what is the 10 most used shortcut keys. I use, like, extrude, which is E, G, move around, and S for scale, and and Control R for loop cuts, Control E, mark freestyle edges, and you don't really need anything else. Yeah, everything is so simple that you don't need to be a professional modeler or professional 3D artist to do this. So I hope you guys learned something from this video, and I hope you enjoyed it. I'll catch you guys in part 4, where we're going to go over base texturing. Catch you guys next time.